All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to this session. So the session is introducing the Drupal Quality Initiative, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first, and then we're going to start to get into the meat of the matter. And this is actually, the way I'm designing this is I'm sharing some of my thoughts and what's possible, and the idea is that if you're inspired to come help with this community initiative, I'll show you how to do that at the end. All right, so let's dive in. So first of all, a little bit about me. I'm the founder of Performant Labs, a development agency based in San Francisco. Some of the clients that we have are CBS Interactive, France Telecom, DocuSign, Robert Half, and a few others like that. So my role has traditionally been as a senior developer or a technical team lead, but I also do business development. And I've worked with Drupal since 2007. And that was before Drupal 5, so that's a long time ago. And I've worked with lots of other frameworks in Java and Apple's frameworks, which have now become Mac OS and so on. So not just PHP, but other languages as well. Okay, so why this talk? Our team is designing our first contributed module. We make lots of software, and a lot of it is just custom. Not just, that's maybe the wrong way to say it, but it's custom and it's meant for the client and it's inside of their operations and it never gets out. Well, this is the first time we're actually making a module that we're giving back to the community. Now, it turns out that some of the concerns that you're going to hear me talk about, they actually apply whether you're talking about custom software or whether you're talking about contributed software. But the module that we're creating is called Campaign Kit. It allows site owners to run campaigns. If you know, this is for nonprofit clients particularly. So if you know third-party services like Classy, these are the services that will let you display a campaign page with some beautiful graphics and some text, and then people can donate and they track the donations over time. We allow, Campaign Kit is designed to do that on your own Drupal 8 website. So, as we're going through this process, I was faced with a choice. When is the right time to declare a beta? Because we're currently on Alpha 3, we're just about to release Alpha 4, and I'm thinking, well, I can't just do alphas forever. I eventually have to do a beta. Well, what are the criteria that you use for sending something to a beta? And from experience of being in this industry for a few decades, I suppose, one of the first things you might say to yourself is, well, when the API are settled, that might be a good reason to go from alpha to beta. But are there other reasons that you might go from alpha to beta? And that got me going. I don't actually know in the Drupal community how we decide to go from alpha to beta to release candidate and then to general availability. So that's what struck all of this. I wanted to be a good citizen, and I didn't know how to be a good citizen because I don't know what the measures are I'm supposed to use before I go to the next step. Maybe there aren't any measures. It seems like maybe people are using just their experience so far, and that's why this initiative was born. So what am I really asking when I ask, when do I go from alpha to beta and so on? I'm asking, how do I measure the quality of our code? Now, who wants to know about quality? There are two groups that I've identified. There might be others, but the two groups that I've identified who want to know about the quality of our modules are the site builders who select the modules for their projects. They go to the project page and they see how many installations they have and so on, and they have to decide whether it's got the functionality that they need. And they sometimes have rules to follow. Often, especially in corporate environments, you'll find this rule, which is that the team can use only modules that actually have a full release. You can't use alphas, you can't use betas, and so on. Often that rule gets relaxed, but often it starts with that rule. And then the second group are the contributed module authors who are committed to writing quality code. We want to know also, how do we measure code quality? So now what's the end goal of this initiative? It's still being designed. So if you guys if anyone here comes on board, we can figure it out as we go. But here's what I'm thinking. We want a reasonably comprehensive way of assessing code quality. And it reasonably comprehensive that's codified, something that we can go point new developers to a document or even experienced developers and say, hey, did you do this? Did you run all your code through spell check? Did you lint all your code to make sure that there are no obvious errors? Are all the formatting rules being followed? That sort of thing. So I'm going to say that what we want is some way to say this is a quality piece of code. Now, it could end up like this. This is our Alpha 3, a little snapshot from our project page for Campaign Kit. And on the right, you see quality level, no assessment. Now, I wrote that, I put that in with Keynote. It doesn't exist now, but it could exist. And it could be really a self-assessment that all of us module maintainers go through, or it could be a more formalized assessment. I would say that we should start with a self-assessment and then move from there. And then what you might see when someone who is maintaining this module decides, okay, I actually want to start going up the ladder of code quality, you might see that. Oh, quality level 2. And then a link underneath with an assessment report. Why did they think that their code is quality level 2? So you can start to see that there's some accountability, there's some transparency, and there are rules that we can start to follow. Now, what could be included in such an assessment report? Well, I started to take a look at all the factors that go into a project. It may not be, what you're about to read may not be applicable to a particular contributed module, but I was just brainstorming, and so I thought, well, team management has quality issues. The requirements documents, or the whole process of determining requirements, there are quality ways of doing that. Design, that might be the user interface design or the functionality design. And then the code, how well is the code actually made under the hood? And by the way, all of these can, there's really skimming over them, but there's actually quite a bit to each one of them. And then documentation, and testing, and DevOps, and then finally monitoring. And if you take a look at some of your projects, all of these, if you put some attention and time into them, you would say, hey, there's some things that I do that really bring quality and some things that I don't do that could bring quality to the project. All right, so for now, for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to just concentrate on code. Why? Because I'm primarily into code, and we have to start somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit. What's the state of software design? Quote, it's like pre-Sumerian civilization, says Brad Cox, who wrote the software that then became Apple's Mac OS. The way we build software is in the hunter-gatherer stage. So I went and found this comic. Sometimes it does feel, oh God, just push more buttons. That is pre-Sumerian or hunter-gatherer. And then there's another fellow by the name of John Munson. He's a software engineer and a professor of computer science at the University of Idaho. And he's not quite that generous as hunter-gatherer. Cave art, he says, it's primitive. We supposedly teach computer science. There's no science here at all. Yes, we do copy and paste. And I do feel for what he says. Sometimes I don't feel like there's a whole lot of science in what I do. Okay, so how do site builders assess their quality now? Well, they look at dev, alpha, beta. They move it through some sort of process until eventually it gets to full release, also known as general availability. They look at the number of installations, and they look at the number of open issues. And maybe there's some other criteria on the project page that they can use, but that's basically how they do it. To get a sense of, before they even install the software, they want to get a sense of what the quality is. Now, how do module maintainers assess quality now? Well, in a lot of cases, it's gut experience, gut feeling informed by experience. Often it's just simply market pressures, which is this has to get out the door now. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a market pressure that says you have to ship something. As long as everyone knows that you are shipping with a certain level of quality and they're willing to take responsibility for that quality, then sometimes shipping sooner rather than later is actually important inside of an organization. And it doesn't matter if the organization is commercial or nonprofit or whatever. So there's no right level of quality. There's simply taking responsibility, in my view. There's just simply taking responsibility for the level of quality that you're releasing at that moment, that maybe there's transparency, that everyone knows that it's at that level, and then you're all in it together as the code goes out the door. That's not saying I'm letting people off the hook for quality. That's not what I'm saying. And then another way is test coverage, how much of the code actually has testing. These are some of the traditional ways that we use to assess quality. And you don't actually, as you see that in that comic, you don't actually have to understand the code if you copy-paste it from Stack Overflow. Okay, so we're going to go back in time. There used to be this thing called the Space Shuttle. You might have heard of it. And when I first got introduced to the whole idea of code quality, it was actually from a Fast Company article that was written 20 years ago when the Space Shuttle was still flying. And you'll see the link there if you want to read it. It's actually really fascinating. And this is a piece from the article. This software never crashes. It never needs to be rebooted. This software is bug-free. It is perfect as human beings have achieved. Consider these stats. The last 3 versions of the program, each 420,000 lines long, had just 1 error each. The last 11 versions of this software had a total of 17 errors. Commercial programs of equivalent complexity would have 5,000 errors. And we all know now that the big pieces of software, they have to ship with lots of errors. So Mac OS and Windows, their number of bugs, even when they ship, are in the tens of thousands. Now, hopefully you know the worst ones. You've clobbered the worst ones. Drupal, you might know, we got rid of the real blockers, but we still had hundreds of major bugs when Drupal 8 shipped. And I haven't looked recently, but it's probably still up there. So the interesting thing about this was, well, let's take a look at that. 420,000 lines and just 1 error each. And in that article, they introduced the idea that you could have levels of quality of the teams that would make software. And it came from the Software Engineering Institute, which is in Carnegie Mellon. And it was obviously the U.S. Defense Department really needed to know how to assess code quality, so they kind of kicked this off decades ago. And they invented something, this team over there, they invented something called the Capability Maturity Model. And they invented 5 levels of organizational maturity that determine effectiveness in delivering quality software. Now, it is designed for larger organizations, such as those executing defense contracts, but you can see, as I go through them, that certain elements can be used by anyone. Now, I'm using actually the previous version of the model. So if you go online, you'll see something with a little bit different wording. I actually think the previous version is slightly better for my purposes for this talk. So let's go take a look at it. So level 1. So now imagine you're in a level 1 programming shop. It's characterized by chaos, periodic panics, and heroic efforts required by individuals to successfully complete projects. Who's been in that situation? Raise your hands. Few, if any, processes are in place. Successes may not be repeatable. Level 2, software project tracking, requirements management, realistic planning, and configuration management processes are in place. Successful practices can be repeated. Level 3, standard software development and maintenance processes are integrated throughout the whole organization. A software engineering process group is in place to oversee software processes, and training programs are used to ensure understanding and compliance. Level 4, metrics are used to track productivity, processes, and products. Project performance is predictable, and quality is consistently high. Level 5, the focus is on continuous process improvement. The impact of new processes and technologies can be predicted and effectively implemented when required. So the takeaway of this article that I got was that at that time there were only 2 programming shops on the planet that were at the highest level of maturity. And one of them was the Space Shuttle software team, and another one was for a defense contractor. I don't remember which one. And you can see that to get to the highest level, it's going to cost a lot of money. And so those organizations had the kind of money. And we don't have the kind of money to maybe bring a team up to the highest level. That doesn't mean that we can't have levels and we can't bring us up as far as it makes sense for the commercial exigency. So level 1 is really the Wild West. And no one likes working in the Wild West. We want to get out of level 1 as quickly as possible. And so I hope that everyone here gets to, if you're in programming, you get to work at least in level 2 and above. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the measures that we could use to assess software quality. These are not my own. I did some research to see what people are using. So certain endpoints like does it perform the intended function? What are the number of bugs per 1,000 lines of code? Is it efficient? Is it performant? Is it easy to use? What's the percentage of the software that doesn't have defects? Is it free of security problems? And then there are intermediate measures, not quite endpoints, but leading to the endpoints, like test coverage. How much of the code actually has testing? Does it follow engineering standards? That would be just everything from code formatting to proper variable naming. Does it use current technology? And can it be modified easily? And then there's training. You can train people to produce better quality. You can train the developers. It might include mentorship. And you want to do code reviews. A lot of knowledge gets transferred during code reviews. People learn a lot. And then the idea, of course, is that if something comes up in one code review, the next time that a person writes similar code, the person who's reviewing that second piece shouldn't see the issue that came up in the first one. So it really is a form of continuous improvement. Testing to improve code quality. Well, you can use linting, you can use automated tests, unit tests, functional, non-UI, UI, and so on. And maybe you'll have less of those situations in the comic there. Okay, other ways to improve code quality. You can use QA people. You can do usability testing. You can add performance/load testing. You can refactor the code to make it easier to understand and to test. You can perform static analysis, perform dynamic analysis, which means running the code and capturing information, metrics as it runs. And the ever popular discussion, is it a bug or is it a feature? Okay, I'm going to show you something in just a little bit of depth just to show you that this is not easy sometimes. So assessing software qualities from first principles, there's a fellow by the name of Reed Holmes, associate professor at UBC. You can go to that YouTube. I recommend it. This is a recent YouTube. I think it's within a year or so. And he tested 7 different open source projects with test suites of varying test sizes, 3, 10, 30, so on. Okay. The result was code coverage is not strongly correlated with test suite effectiveness. Well, that's interesting. That's a little bit counterintuitive. You would have thought that the more code was covered by tests, the higher the quality would be. So it turns out that teams that are concerned about code coverage tend to be teams that produce higher quality code. In other words, it's not the coverage itself, it's just the fact that people are paying attention to the coverage and that they're doing work in this area that tends to produce a better quality end product. So it can sometimes feel like this when you're looking at code quality. Name and describe the 5 key phases of software development. Denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. I don't think it should have gotten an X. That should have gotten full points on that one. Okay, so let's go back now to the project. I wanted to give you a sense of the landscape of quality, what's possible here. The project currently lives at that URL. It's easy, DQI, Drupal Quality Initiative. And I've already begun work on it because I need it for my campaign kit module. And I'm going to keep on doing work on it, and if no one joins me, I'm going to keep on going and keep on talking about it and hopefully get other people interested. But what I noticed right away is that we actually do need some better tools. Tools can make a huge difference to make your life faster. And so one of the tools is software that tracks every file in the module and the status of certain operations. Has it been spell checked? Has it been formatted correctly? Are the variable names correct? Do all the strings use translation? Where are the custom tests and what's the coverage? And all of that, in my view, should be stored in the database. And then I'd like to know what the values of all that are for each of the releases. And I'd like to know, first of all, did something happen? Did the code get spell checked? And you have to actually do that every release because people add new text every release. So you can't actually just assume that because it passed a test once before, it's going to pass again. Okay, so I went looking. There are some code tools out there. They don't quite do what we need, but they're Start, Code Climate, CodeBeat, Codicy, and Scrutinizer. They're automated code review. They give you visibility into the entire development lifecycle, which is what I was saying. I would like to track this over time. They work with many different languages. Those are just some of them, but the big ones. And you can go to that link for a comparison. And it's actually a really well done comparison that shows you the pros and cons of each of these tools and pricing and so on. So what am I actually proposing? I propose that we start with looking at the code. Let's get a checklist together. Sorry, but only because we have to start somewhere. And if someone else wants to work on documentation, that's totally fine. But I'm starting with the code, and I'm inviting you to come with me. Let's have Zoom meetings online every 2 weeks, let's say. And let's just start with a checklist and make sure that it's reasonably thorough. And then later, once we've got a good checklist, we can select the items that go into each level. I propose that maybe level 1 is fairly easy, that a module maintainer can get to level 1 by making sure that simple things are done, like the code formatting is there, and it's spell checked, and all the strings are going through the translate function. And then maybe it's a bigger step to get to level 2 and so on. So here's the code checklist so far, part of it anyway. I've got possibly 20 items in there. You can see everything from, are the complex variables code, do they have code hinting? Are the imports alphabetical and actually used? In other words, is there any dead code there? Is the code run through a spell checker? And so on. And then there's a document that gets linked from each of one of those checklist items so that you can go learn what it actually means to pass that test. Right now, it's a Google spreadsheet, the first document, and this is a Google document, just a Google Doc. And I think it's something like 20 pages or so. And so what someone should be able to do is go click on the spreadsheet on a particular task. They're brought to this document, and they read exactly what's necessary in order to pass that check. Okay, so are you interested? Come see me after the session, and I'll get your contact information, or send me an email there if you're watching this online. I'll set up a Slack channel for us so that we can talk in between our meetings. I'll propose a schedule for the meeting. What I'm thinking right now is something like the second or fourth Tuesday of every month. So nothing onerous, but enough that there's a good pace to the movement of the project forward. I'm a fan of short meetings, but they can't be 5 minutes because you actually have to discuss things. So I'm not anti-meeting, but I'm also not, I don't think the meetings should be very long. So I would say maybe the meetings can be 30 minutes every couple weeks, but maybe the first one needs to be a little bit longer so people can introduce themselves and we can make a little bit more planning. Okay, and that's it. It's time for Q&A. Thanks for listening to the presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
What was the name of the initiative that you're doing?
It's the Drupal Quality Initiative, and the URL is drupal.org/project/D as in dog, QI.
Have you discussed this much with anybody on like Drupal security team or anything? 'Cause they're the ones that do a lot of code review as it is. I'm sure they spend a lot of time looking for code security issues, but also I'm sure they're aware of standards and stuff like that. They probably make module developers aware of that whenever they review their code. So if you aware of, like, have you done any talking with them?
Not yet. Not yet. It's and actually a lot of what you saw there came actually from Drupal.org, from our standards and whatnot, and they're kind of organized in a different way. But there's actually still a fair amount that's not on Drupal.org, and I'd love to talk to them. And I think that there's probably a little bit more work that can be done before it makes sense to actually approach them, because it feels a little bit not baked yet.
There was a session earlier talking about moving to Git apps or whatever.
Yep, Michael Huss.
Yeah, and so a lot of that stuff you're talking about, all the JavaScript linting, code snipping, all that stuff can be run as scripts on some of the. I haven't done it on GitHub, but I've done it on Bitbucket. So Bitbucket has pipelines which you can run your custom scripts like linting.
Yep.
So we do a lot of that to sort of control our custom code and just make our code quality higher. Is that, you know, it saves someone, another developer, having to go look at it and just tell you, hey, your formatting is wrong. We have scripts. We'll just sort of go through and pass fail it, and then it'll tell you what the fails are, and you go fix your stuff. So I'm envisioning something like that making its way when Drupal does start getting all of its module, kind of contribute modules into something like GitLab or whatever that has scripts like that running on it. This seems to make a lot of sense to be able to run all that sort of, like, spell checking.
Oh yeah.
Stuff, like, just have it all automated, and then you just get a pass fail, a list of things to fix without someone having to actually do your code.
Right, and so I see the same sort of future. Like, I can really see Drupal.org providing that sort of level of backstop. Now, maybe a particular team might still use PHP Storm, so they're going to have their tools ahead of time, and then maybe they have some CI system that they're going to use, and maybe they're going to catch things before they get it up to Drupal.org. Maybe people don't have that much kind of that level of infrastructure, and they'll use Drupal.org. But you're right. Like, I found out today that GitLab actually has a built-in PHP, or not a P, it just has an IDE in it, which is fantastic. That's amazing. So you can totally see that the future that we have is that eventually, probably when the code gets checked in, the whole bunch of stuff is going to get run against it. Not just running the tests, but all the other tests that you mentioned. Yeah. No, I think I would love that future. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Roughly timeline for when that happened?
It was supposed to be done yesterday. Yeah.
Well, they're hoping. So he did say it's a little bit behind, and he's not promising. This was Michael, because I was in the same session, and so they're possibly January, February, March, somewhere around there. But it actually turned out to be quite a thorny issue. Yeah, it's a big job. Yep. Rob?
Yes, I was just going to say that I was having this conversation with various people at a Drupal con back 5 years ago. So it's about, oh yes, this is coming next year.
The GitLab?
Not GitLab, but a solution to the same sets of problems. So
Yeah, we've been working on it a while.
yes, so
Yeah.
and I think everyone sees this in the future, but the future isn't now or even next year probably for this. Because there's a lot of work to get, even just the basic testing but working smoothly and reliably. So
Yeah,
it'd be great, but I didn't think we could wait for it.
Right, and we don't have to. We can, and even if there were some automated tests, the chance that they're going to cover the comprehensive list that's being formed in this initiative is very low. They're going to just do a subset of things, and it's so, you know, some of our team members English isn't their native language, so you can sort of see that the English grammar is not quite right there. Well, it might actually still pass a spell check because the words are correct, but where do I record that someone with native English looked at all the text and said that's correct grammar, for instance? We don't have those sorts of tools. And these other tools that I showed you, they don't seem to go to that extent yet. And I'm actually rather shocked. So I've been asking everyone, this whole camp, how do I track the status of all these tests, which are not just unit tests, like I mean spell check or whatever, across an entire module? And I got a lot of suggestions that you could wire some things together. It seems strange that in 2018 we don't have better tools to do all this. So if anyone knows of them, please, definitely let me know. Do you have?
Symphony have anything like this?
Yeah, but you see, each of these tools can test a file for a thing. But how do I get a report that shows me that it's been tested across all the files on each release? And then how do I get reports that show me that I'm improving over time between releases? I don't know yet. Did you have a question? You look like you're... No?
Well, no.
Okay.
But it's very
It's very interesting, and it's kind of strange that in 2018 we're still struggling with that sort of stuff, because we love automation. We're computer people, and this has not been automated yet, as far as I can tell. It's very strange.
It's somewhat automated for modules on the boards, like for your own environments to track.
Right.
We keep an ongoing scorecard of what your tasks have to record.
Right. Well, and those are tests, though, as opposed to all the other things that I need to know. Like, just to give you that same example, like, did someone with native English review all the new text that just got added to this file? I was talking to Rob Thorne, and he said that at one point he was part of the Japanese implementation of Netscape some time ago. And when some new text got added, it had to get looked at by a Japanese, and there were mechanisms to make sure that a native Japanese speaker looked at it. So he thought that the group of people that might have solved this were the multilingual people, because they have to keep track on a very granular basis of strings. I reached out to Gabor, and he said, it's an interesting problem, but no, we don't have a solution for it. Yeah. Yes?
Comment on the theme audit session. It was like yesterday.
Wait, say that again?
Theme audit.
I was not in that session.
One of the things they did propose was to have a metrics folder
Mm-hmm.
that tracked, what happened on the theme. Run tools that track the results over time. So
Well,
somebody is starting that.
So, okay, great. So that's even just a start. Put it in a folder. Now, how do you handle that over time is the next issue. I'd love to throw that all into a database, and then I can start reporting on it.
Yeah, so anyways, might talk to them some other.
Okay, do you remember who the speaker was?
I can.
Okay, yeah, if you can let me know at the end, that would be great. Any other comments or questions? All right, okay, then let's call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone.